Hello and welcome to Our Voices. I'm Amina Aliyu, joined by my colleagues Barbara and Siminesh. Hello and Happy New Year, ladies.
Happy New Year.
You each owe me one bad New Year joke. I haven't seen you since last year. That's my bad New Year joke.
Well, thanks to COVID, we haven't seen each other for a longer period of time.
So
it's good that we are back here at least.
So true, and I'm so glad I'm here with you, ladies. My first time here in the show.
I know, welcome, Barbara.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Any New Year resolutions?
Many. That's the problem.
Drop one.
I think focus on my mental and physical health. That's priority.
I think focusing on myself. You know, we are journalists. We are so busy and tend to forget ourselves. So this year, I plan to focus on myself. Exercise.
I plan to focus on sleep.
Oh, yes.
That's what I plan to focus on.
That's a good one.
But let's take a look at last year. 2022 was an emotional year for women worldwide. From the abortion debates sparked by the overturning of Roe versus Wade here in the United States, to the ghastly discovery of female child factories in southeastern Nigeria, consisting of girls aged 14 to 17, according to an article published by Joseph Skerdlik of the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, to the recent Taliban order suspending higher education for all female students in Afghanistan. We also have the splendid images from Qatar of Moroccan mothers dancing and celebrating their son's victory as the Moroccan team advanced to the quarterfinals at the World Cup. We had the cancellation of the Independence Day celebration in Tanzania by President Samia Suluhu Hassan. She also redirected the funds to build dormitories for children with special needs. 2022 was quite a year. On this week's episode, my co-host and I are revisiting some of the biggest stories that we covered last year. We'll also look ahead and discuss some things that we might see in this year. Ladies, let's start with the events that most captured your attention in your regions and worldwide. Siminesh, let's start with you.
Well, 2022 was full of many historical and challenging events, and if I have to reflect on some of them, you know, the conflict in northern Ethiopia, it lasted for 2 years, including last year, and this had a major toll on women and children especially. You know, women are subjected to rape, sexual violence. They lost their husbands, brothers, children, and this was the most devastating. You know, because of this war, around 2.4 million people were displaced, and most of them are women, and of course with their children, and they have to walk long distances to go where they can get safety and shelter, and even on the way, they get more abuses. There are women who delivered on the way in the forest by themselves, not getting enough medical care.
Assistance, yeah.
Exactly, and you know, once even they get to the shelter, they may not even get enough food to feed their children, let alone themselves. So, I mean, this was a very challenge of, I mean, thanks to the peace agreement now, hopefully this will not continue.
Yeah.
This will...
Another thing that comes to my mind, each time I see women in that type of distress, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what if she's on her period? I can't help but think, how do you deal with that kind of stress?
That would even become a luxury at this point, because the most important thing is being able to be safe and have something to eat, have something to feed your children. So, as I said, now there is a peace agreement. Hopefully things will get better. But even going back to your home, going back to your village and rebuilding life again is difficult. But again, the year was not all gloomy for Ethiopia. There was some happy moments, especially like during the World Athletics Championship. Ethiopia finished second next to USA, I know. And of the 4 gold medals we got, 3 of them were by women athletes.
Of course they were.
Of course they were.
Of course they were.
And I mean, people were so happy, cheerful, and you can see that when people came out on the street to receive them and greet them, and it was so beautiful, and it was a proud moment for the country. Looking at a larger view of the East Africa, we have Sudan, and Sudan also had a series of protests going on, and women were at the forefront, demanding a civilian government, demanding the end of, you know, violence against women. As we said, as a case in Ethiopia, you know, in any conflict, women are always the victims. They are used as a weapon of war. So these women have been asking, speaking, you know, this has to end. We need peace. We need stability. And even I remember at the end of the year, they were protesting in front of United Nations, asking for more protection for women and children in the conflict areas. So women were really speaking up. That's something we saw in this past year. Another point is inflation. I mean, this is a global challenge.
It definitely is.
Yes,
definitely is.
I mean, everyone around the world has been suffering, impacted,
one way or the other.
One way or the other. But I think women are most affected than men because of one, financial insecurity. Women always are less income earners. They always, especially in Africa, the case is that men are the breadwinners and women have to stay, so they have to depend on the men to give them money. And also because the gender imbalance, I mean, even though they are not earning income, they are the ones who run the home, who are going to do groceries. And I was surprised to find out even items essential for women are more expensive, or the prices for them have gone more than for men. Like take formal clothes. The price for formal clothes for women increased 26%, but for men it was 6%. I mean, how crazy is that? Exactly.
We are way more exposed when we talk about inflation. And women, as you said, are the ones who go to the grocery stores, to the farmer's market, and see changes daily on prices, changing everything.
You come back to your husband and he's like, that's not true. That wasn't the price last year.
So you are even paying emotionally, right?
Exactly.
Yes. I mean, we also talked about, this is something we discussed in one of our episodes. Yeah. We talked how sanitary pads, even the prices have gone 10%.
It's insane.
This is an essential product. Well, just to end this on a very positive note, recently the Tanzanian president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, took away the celebration of the Independence Day, as you mentioned earlier,
yes,
and diverted the budget to help children with special needs. And we are talking about $500,000.
And that is what I want to see every Independence Day. African leaders, take your cue from the Tanzanian president. That is what I want to see. I mean, it's okay to celebrate Independence Day, indeed, but every year the same celebration.
We need to create more independence.
Put that money into structures that you can show. This is what we did at 60 years of independence. This is what we did at 40 years of independence. You know what I mean? So
I independence should not be just from colonialism. It should also be from poverty.
From poverty, exactly.
Yes.
From the main challenges of the continent and the descendants around the world as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Barbara, what about you?
So in Lusophone Africa, which is the Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa, we have one curious case of the Africa's richest woman, Isabel dos Santos.
Yes.
She was considered once the richest woman in Africa by Forbes magazine. She was the first billionaire in the country, female billionaire in the country. So she's going through a lot of heat in Angola. Her assets worth about $1 million were seized by the Angolan Supreme Court. And she's being accused by for embezzlement, for corrupt acts, while she was the head of the oil company of Angola, Sonangol. She's the daughter of a former president, José Eduardo dos Santos, and she was once considered the princess of Angola, the princess of Africa. So she's really well known in that region. And she has denied the accusations. She said that she's being a target of a political witch hunt. We have contacted her lawyer several times, and he said that she would not comment on this, but publicly that's what she says, that she's being targeted politically. So we're about to see what's going to happen with this woman in the Angolan Supreme Court, in the Angolan justice system. Again, she was one of the richest women in Africa. So it's very important for us to know what this woman is doing, what she has done while she was heading one of the main companies in the continent. So it's a story that we're definitely gonna look for this year, and it was very important in 2022.
Yeah.
On the other coast, in Mozambique, we have a conflict in Cabo Delgado, which is the northern part of the country, and women, as always, have been the main target of extremists. So in this region of Cabo Delgado, the conflict started about in October 2017. It's a beautiful region, and women there, it's a very matriarchal society. So women are the backbone of that society. They are the leaders of the community, the leaders of their household. They fish, they control agricultural production. They're at the control of everything. But they're, as we've seen many times before, the main target for violence. So what's happening there is that more and more women are being kidnapped or forced to join the extremist groups.
Oh dear.
Yes, and they are being used as a weapon of war, so suffering sexual violence.
That's what devastating about war is. Women are always, they're not the one who are causing these conflicts, but they're the one who will be paying the price.
The price for it, yes.
Heavily.
Heavily.
Yeah. They're the ones fighting for democracy, fighting for their societies, but they are the ones that have been the target of it all. So all of that violence. So what's happening is that the conflict in 2022 expanded to other provinces below Cabo Delgado. Cabo Delgado is up north. So it's spreading throughout the region. So many families are fleeing that region and going to resettlement centers around. In resettlement centers, again, women are the target of violence. And what we've seen is that they're being targeted not only of sexual violence, but many of them are offering sex for food. What's called transactional sex, because of like the extreme poverty that they are facing in those resettlement centers. They have to provide for those families. So many times the only means that they have is their bodies.
Sex for food.
Yes,
how horrible
and mainly
is that?
girls.
I know.
And that region is already very known for like forced marriages, early pregnancy. And these cases are just getting like higher and higher because many of those families, they need to get rid of those girls because they need to provide for their families. So what they do is that they offer the girls for marriage very early on.
It's really sad how these conflict stories are all the same throughout in every region. It's the same. Once there's conflict, the stories are the same. Women, children are always paying the price.
And families are always looking for less mouths to feed, and the first go-to, the women. Remember the with the drought story that we did of in Ethiopia, so many people took their children out of school because, well, how else do they provide? Let someone else deal with that issue.
And women are the ones again paying that price as well.
But anyway.
What about you, Amina?
So, around sometime early December, I went into an editorial meeting for House of Service, right? And I wasn't really paying attention, but I heard the words First Lady and student and fat being combined in the same sentence. So after the meeting,
What is that?
I said, okay, what's going on with Nigeria's First Lady? So I went online and I saw there was a thread on Twitter. Apparently, Nigeria's First Lady allegedly had someone named Aminu Adamu, a 24-year-old student, arrested, and she definitely pressed she pressed charges against him for defamation, took him to court. I have never heard of a first lady in court because he called her fat. But the defamation was he accused her of gaining weight off of poor people's money and resources. So that was the defamation part. And it was really interesting because he came out eventually and he apologized to her on camera, he apologized to her on Twitter, and he was saying something like, oh, my people on social media realize that your Twitter followers and everybody commenting are not going to be there when it gets real. They're not going to be there in court to support you. When things get legal, you're going to be the only one. So on one part, I found it funny. On the other hand, you need to be accountable for what you say.
Exactly.
It's really damaging. I think of these politicians and their children and all the accusations that fly around and what affects their families. So one part of me is finding it hilarious. Another part of me is like, yes, I'm glad that she took him to court. You don't just throw accusations
what else I noticed? How powerful social medias have become.
Yes, definitely.
And that is something we saw in the last year, like social media is becoming more stronger, getting more platforms, and people, of course, having more voice on them.
Yeah. But many people think that's no one's land. So when we see somebody taking action, especially about fat shaming or bullying or anything like that.
And how do you know she's not sick?
Exactly.
You know?
And fat shaming is the thing that you know that's going to target one's self-esteem.
Definitely.
Especially
like
female
mental health.
Mental health. That's what we've been talking about. So it's an easy way of really hurting someone.
Yes.
I'm glad that someone is taking action because the internet is no one. There should be a control
Some
to
type
what
of
you're
accountability.
Accountability, yes.
Especially at the time of, defamation, increasing hate speech, misinformation, disinformation, there definitely needs to be some action taken.
And still in the world of politics, I'm 100% looking forward to Nigeria's upcoming elections in a few weeks, because one of the most conservative parts of Nigeria produced a candidate, Aisha Binani, for the All Progressives Congress, APC. So let me put it in context, in American context. It's like saying Democrat and Republican. So the APC is the ruling party, and she was a sitting senator, and she emerged as the flag bearer for the gubernatorial elections. But guess what? They took her to court, took her off the ballot. Her runner-up took her to court, took her off the ballot. She went to the Court of Appeal. She fought and she won. And she's on the ballot. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how this is going to play out, because she represents conservative values, family values. And it's interesting to see that even though a woman who represents all of those values, I want to say, like, on that type of platform, is still being attacked, is still being tried to, they're still trying to push her down. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that election is going to pan out.
It's also empowering, and, to see a woman, defeating all her challenges and reaching to this point by itself is really, really inspiring.
And we'll see that in a few weeks.
Yes.
But also, honestly, for me personally, what caught my attention the most in 2022 was actually events that happened outside of Africa. So looking at the Taliban and what they recently did of restricting higher education for all female students, and watching an interview of one of the Taliban members, and he was asked by Piers, I think his name is Piers Morgan, he asked him, but your daughter is in school? And he said yes, and the next thing that came was, but she observes the hijab. And that brought back memories of, like, Iran, the protest that went on in Iran, and it was still around hijab. So it really made me reflect, it really made me think about the privileges that I have as an African, the privileges that I have within my culture. And for the first time, I was looking at my glass as half full and not half empty. And so many times we talk about the obstacles that are placed, not wanting women in positions of power, and then I felt as though I was overlooking the other privileges and the most beautiful things about my culture. So those external events made me realize how fortunate I was to have that choice, and to really reflect on religion and what hijab means, and the freedom of choice, and the fact that there really is no compulsion in religion.
The interesting thing about it is that it was an announced tragedy. So we have been reporting on it before the takeover of Taliban. That was a fear. And that's what we were going to talk about, what we have reported. We could not have done our reporting without the help of other female reporters here at VOA, and our stringers as well, who brought us the best stories from the continent. Let's look at some of the eye-catching stories our colleagues covered in 2022.
We are here at the border of Madika.
VOA's Mary McGoway and Karina Chowdhury covered the war in Ukraine in February from Poland, where they shared the stories of refugees, thousands of African students concerned about their educational futures, and a Ukrainian-Ghanaian family divided by war. Falestine Iman traveled to Mogadishu in Somalia to cover the presidential elections, where she had an exclusive interview with the new Somalia president, Hassan Sheikh Mohammed. On November 10th, VOA's Lenore Madu interviewed Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, who hosted a roundtable discussion with members of the African diaspora community in the state of Virginia. On August 24th, Angola held general elections, the most disruptive in recent history. VOA's Myra de la Celeste with the Portuguese service detailed her trip to Luanda, Angola, after covering the election there for 13 days. Haiti Adams, host of VOA's Straight Talk Africa, sat down with climate activist and UNICEF's Goodwill Ambassador Vanessa Nakate in New York to discuss climate action and activism. Nigeria's First Lady, Khadija Bazoum, in an interview with VOA House's Grace Alahiri Abdu, decried what she described the inhumane practice of sending women to street begging in her country.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre.
In an exclusive interview with VOA's Dili Diko, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mali, Abdoulaye Diop, gave an overview of the hot topics of the moment. On the sidelines of the recent United Nations General Assembly in New York, Ariane Tangashaka spoke with Monica Gangos, the First Lady of Namibia, on her stop here in Washington, D.C. at the Namibian Embassy.
Ladies.
Woo-woo. Shout out to all the ladies.
Yeah, so many stories we told in 2022.
Definitely could not have done it without their efforts.
Ladies of VOA, right?
Yes, making our show so colorful.
Well, we'll continue to review the year 2022. But now it's time for a break. We want you to share on our social media platforms your expectations in 2023 for elections, policies, academics and entertainment awards. We're on Facebook at VOA Africa, on Instagram and on Twitter. We are on VOA Our Voices. We're also on WhatsApp. Our US number, country code is +1 202 503 9025. When we return, we will look at the hopes and dreams of people on the continent for the new year. We'll be right back.
From around the world. Let's go.
Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices. Let's now go to Ghana and hear what people have to say about their expectations in 2023.
I would want to see a change relates to the policy level, where we would have policies in place supportive of women's rights. Specific social issues that impact on women's rights in Ghana, I believe, mainly relate to social norms. And an example of this relates to the specific things that we have been conditioned to believe or to do because we are women or because we are men.
I think that a lot of things or challenges come from women, especially in Africa and in Ghana. And I think that one major challenge women are facing currently is inequality at our workplaces, right from recruitment, retention, and opportunities.
Our norms and traditions in our rural areas, women are still seen as secondary citizens and all that, so we need to up that game in that area. We really need to look at those areas. They go do all the work on the farms, and then the men are the ones who normally get the appraisals, the right appraisals, and then they are really not recognized that much. I think that part kind of impacts them a lot.
You know, the change that I want to see is taking taxes off of women's sanitary products.
That's yes.
Yes. It should be free for all women, actually.
I know. It should be free. Forget about taking off the tax. Just make it free.
It's a human right.
It is. It is. And we have been here in Our Voices. We have been raising many different issues, especially issues that affect women in Africa. As we move into 2023, let's look at the minute to look at some of the most memorable moments in our 2022 coverage of women on the continent. The prices are going up, and the gas prices are going up, and so millions of people, especially women and children, are suffering from lack of food and also are relying only on aid.
You know, the first time I had like an epiphany about how much of a global village the world has become was one time I went back home and I called the hair lady to come make my hair. You know how it is like back home. And I was sitting down and she looked at the volume of my hair and she was like, okay, so this is going to be 800 naira. And I said to her, this used to be 500, like what happened in the 1 year that I've been gone? And she said to me, oh, the dollar has gone up.
you hear people say, okay, go to school. If they let you go to school, you know, get a university education and be hush about it, right? Like, even if you're going to be a career woman, like, don't put it in our faces. You know, we don't tend to be public people. It's not that, you know, we don't excel in the things that we do. It's just that we're very shy about it, or like we're very reserved about it.
That's right.
And so for me, you know, coming out, it's very unusual, right? Like, I'm not going to say that, you know, I'm the first Ariwa person to succeed or like to do big things on a global stage. It's just that, you know, I think I'm one of the few ones that are really brave to do it.
I don't want to be around a treacherous girl, like the one that's like smiling at you, happy with you, but backstabbing you, lying about you and all those things, because it's just
for me, the one that is very secretive, you know, the one that's always in your life, want to know about you, but doesn't want to share anything about themselves. That really hurts me and gives me discomfort.
For me, it's the nagging friend, the one who's always complaining, I don't like my job, my husband did this to me, oh my God. I can't, because it's so draining. When you want to sincerely give someone emotional support,
that's true.
When you listen to their problem, you want to think about it before you give them advice. You don't want to give them advice based on just emotion, right? But if you're constantly having to deal with that, it can be really draining on yourself and your own mental health as well.
That friendship show was my favorite.
Was it?
It was. I remember like us sharing like what friendship means to each of us. Yes.
I had a question for you both, actually. Which was the story or the show that impacted you the most? You said that the friendship one was
that was one of the memorable ones we had, but also about the rise of prices, the inflation was one of the memorable one for me.
For me, it was seeing African women take charge of African fashion, and so for me it was the fashion show, and the two young ladies that we featured on that show. That was absolutely amazing for me.
We have a brand new year 2023, and we're going to bring up a lot more issues, right?
A lot more issues.
Yes.
As I said, sanitary products free for women.
That's our motto for this year.
That's what I want to see in 2023. That's my wish list to congresses all around the world.
Yeah, I mean, Africa is a big continent. We have a lot of countries, and we have it's a big nation with a lot of young people too. So we'll be bringing issues that affect young people, that are making a difference, not only for their communities, but even at global level.
And I dare to say that Africa and the African diaspora, as a member of the African diaspora, what happens in the continent has an effect throughout the globe.
Exactly.
So women of African descent around the globe are looking at the continent and looking for the solutions that the continent is going to provide.
Last week we had a show about street food, right? And that was
100%. So guys, that is our show for this week. We look forward to bringing you more stories that are amazing and introducing you to phenomenal women this year. On behalf of my co-hosts and the Voice of America, I'm Amina Aliyu. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.